This region had seen the rise and the fall of great civilizations. So it used to be called Assyria. So we have the Assyrians, then the Babylonians, then Alexander the Great. After Alexander the Great, we have the Roman Empire. After the Roman Empire, we have the Islamic forces coming from Arabia and occupying this land and Arabizing it as well as Islamizing it. There are two nation groups here that have been, who are native to this land and have been persecuted for so many years. The Assyrians, the Christians, the Chaldeans, as well as the Yazidi people, who are Kurdish-speaking people. They are not Arabs, but they are Kurdish, and they never became Muslims. Therefore, they have been persecuted. It has been estimated over the last 700 years, they have lost 23 million people. They are not loved by the people of the land because they consider them as Satan worshippers, and they are abhorred, they are hated. No one want to be associated with them. So they isolated themselves in the area of Sinjar and Mount Sinjar, which is a holy mountain to them. But recently the war, they were targeted by ISIS and they had no choice but to flee their enclave, the area of Sinjar, and they had to flee to here.
كل القوات الأمنية العراقية والبيشمركة كلها انسحبوا، بس احنا بقينا ب 11. ما عندنا شيء، الله واحد، واثنين اكو جبل سنجار.
ما يقارب ال 550 ألف يزيدي خسروا كل شيء خلال ساعة. أكثر من 7000 فتاة أصبحت بيد داعش. قتلوا أكثر من 6000 رجل. قتلوا، تقدرين تقولين قتلوا نفسية الإنسان يزيدي، قتلوها. مارسوا أبشع وسائل الاضطهاد، القتل، السرقة، قتل العائلة أمام قتل أطفال الأم أمام أعين الأم. مارسوا ممارسات لا يمكن وصفها بالكلمات والجمل مع البنات القاصرات، 14 سنة، 9 سنوات، 7 سنوات، 80 سنة. يقتل وينهب ويسرق ويغتصب البنات بحجة الدخول إلى الجنة. مهما أقول عن داعش ومهما أقول عن قساوة داعش وعن لا أستطيع أن أعبر عن رداءة داعش. يعني أي كلمة تقولين بحق داعش فهي قليلة، لأنه هو أقل من كل شيء.
وبربشتي زعل مش ما برين شاحناني نكوستراني نوم بعد كله أمبرين راق عمد حبسة كابن أبكرين سيشيرا بتشارشيرا من حبسة بالأردبون جابين وعغان تغاري طوات ما نتلقي ما وقتهم متنا من النار رجع دارا ما رجو مدبن أبكرين نيكوي عابد.
ورحت جبت مي يعني لاختي والحلام وانطت للدواعش، مو بس لنا انطيتهم. واحنا والله بالليل كنا نبكي نصيح، بس احنا عدا الله وما حد ينطينا مي. واحنا قلت كنت اقول للحلام اليوم الطياره راح تضرنا، تعرفين احنا ما ظل احنا بيت حوالينا بس بيتنا.
زحمه وطرس وبرش وعمل برطمان استعمل هالوزن ما هذا هذا صبدان حولان الواحد صابت نهاسي هذا الناس اللي بيسنت كثير ما قلتوا فأهلي ربهم كريم ويوفر الشيء يا أمي وأصبجوا وقت واجبه هنا في ناس الواجبات هذه هذا أم بينجيبوها الاسم الزارو بيجي واجبه ما بيستلاموا.
The Muslims were not welcoming them, but it was the church. The Church of Jesus Christ welcomed them, and our own churches, our sister churches here in this area, the Alliance Church, has met them along the way. They met the Yazidis, they provided them with water, with food, with clothing, and they are still with them.
في يوم من الأيام زرنا أنا وأخ براين المخيم. اشتقينا مع شخص كان عنده بنات مفقودات، بنات صغار مفقودات في يم داعش، وسألنا شنو الطلبة اللي تريد نصلي من أجلها، فقال أن يرجعوا بناتي ويرجعوا أهلي المفقودين. بالفعل صلينا من أجل هذه الطلبة.
ويعني بس نمنا هيجي بالساعة 1 بالليل طائرة طفت، والطائرة ضربتنا، و40 من الدواعش كانوا ويانا، كلهم قتلوا بس أنا أختي وأحلام طلعنا من ايه، وعاد فجأة عاد طلعنا بالساعة 4 نزلنا بينات الجيش والدواعش 10 دقائق مشينا، وعاد رحنا وواحد من الدواعش جمعنا، يعني هو شوفنا الطريق.
One of the stories, one of the Yazidi women was telling me, different organizations have come and gone, but the ka, and somebody said to her, the kanisa, which is the Arabic word for church. She said, yes, the church. They met us on the way and they are still with us. And she looked and she pointed at one of our pastors and she said, this father has met us along the way with a bottle of water and he is still bringing us water.
من الجبل، من أول يوم نزلوا من الجبل كانوا سيدات بالكنيسة يطبخون ويجيبون أكل ومي وشغلات لهم.
Another Yazidi sheikh, a leader in the community, he said, you Christians, you understand who we are. You understand our suffering because you have been suffering for the last 2,000 years since Christianity existed, and especially the last 1,400 years. You understand us, you understand our pain, you understand our suffering because you have suffered just like us.
في البداية الكنيسة كنت أنا وغادة مع بعض نشتغل في المخيمات، في الزيارات، في الصلوات، لكن لما شفنا وراء فترة بأنه احتياج آخر خاص بالسيدات، التقينا معهم بالمخيمات اللي كانوا جايين من داعش، فانفصلنا عن الخدمة. أنا بدأت آخذ نفس الخدمة القديمة بالمواد الغذائية والاحتياجات، هي دخلت في مكان آخر، في مركز آخر تستقبل اللي جايين من داعش السيدات، وهناك يساعدوهم هم حسب ما أتم برامج ومنهاج.
وبأن هم لهم قيمة في المجتمع، وما يقدر أي شخص أنه يسلب هاي القيمة أو يسلب أي إمكانيات عندهم يقدرون أن يقدموها للمجتمع لعوائلهم، وأنه هم أيضا مخلوقين على صورة الله، وأنه عندهم قيمة في نظر الله، والله يحبهم، وإحنا أيضا ننظر لقيمتهم الغالية، وإحنا أيضا نحبهم.
والله بحياتي أنا ما أنسى هذا الشيء شفته بيد داعش.
What was your reaction to this? Anger, okay. Hurt, okay. Speechless, and that's understandable too. It's amazing, isn't it? Let me give you a little backstory of why you ended up seeing this video today. Well, I was doing the research on for the last series and looking through some CMA resources. I came across this video, and the moment I saw it, I said, this is the next thing after we finish this. This is how the year ends with this video. And then, so I was looking at it, and I was like, how do you react to this? How does a person even respond to this? And as I was looking in that and pulling out scripture, I ended up finding myself in the journey of a whole other series. So I'll tell you right now, this here goes beyond even just the one mission thing. It leads into a whole other series. Because what I found is, believe it or not, is whatever your reaction was to this is an indicator of your eternity. It's an indicator. How can you, wow, that's a big, if I don't take this right, no, I'm not saying, I'm just saying it is a barometer. It is an indicator of where you are with God. And I'm going to eventually bring in lots of verses with this. The Yazidi people will kind of be our real life test in this case. as we look at some verses and set up some concepts. And this morning, all I want to do is set up some basic concepts for us. And later on in January, we'll take it from there. But the passage we're going to anchor on, this is the first passage that came to me as I was looking at this. And it goes back to Jesus. He was giving one of the most vivid teachings. It's not a parable, it's actually more of a simile. He's talking about church people. Okay? He's talking about where we are and what's important in life. Matthew 25, chapter 25, verse 31. If you have guide sheets, you're going to see, once again, a number of operative phrases underlined where eventually we will deal more in depth with them as time goes on. As Jesus is speaking, he says this, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as shepherds separates the sheep from the goats. He'll put the sheep on the right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world.' Why? Well, for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go and visit you?' And the king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.' Then he will say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me.' They also will answer, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick in prison and did not help you?' And he will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me.' Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life." Now, in time we'll go deeper, but just getting a fundamental overview of where we're going. Basic study, we said, as we look at Christianity, look at your Bible and you want to study almost anything, you can fall back on a few questions. Who's speaking? Who are they speaking to? And what's the context? And so we're going to go in that kind of direction. Who are the subjects? Who are the people Jesus is speaking to? Well, we know this is before the church per se, because Jesus is speaking. This is before the cross. But he's talking to church people. He is talking to those people who profess to be following God. So we know those are the people that are being talked to. They are the subject of this simile going on. Who are the objects, and who are the people he's talking about? Well, the question in a nutshell is the needy, right? He's talking about the needy. And he does it in a way that's way ahead of his time. If you've studied any basic psychology in high school or maybe in college or something, you've probably come across this little thing called the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And it's divided up, this guy Maslow, when he was, what did people really need in life? Is basically what it comes down to. And he broke it into needs from the most basic to what we must have. And you see it's the three main divisions: basic needs, psychological needs, basically deal with your self-worth, and then self-fulfillment needs, where the self-actualizations, he calls it, where you find the value of your life and what goes on. And if you look at what Jesus said in this passage, he touches on every one of those. The people in need are in every one. You've got the people talking about basic needs, but you look at the psychological needs, those who are lonely, those who are sick, those who just need somebody to say they're worth something. And he even has the self-actualization, because he does this amazing genius thing in here, because he's talking about the needy. We have no problem seeing that. But he doesn't say they. He says I. So his identity is tied directly. Can't divide them. The needy, Jesus. The same. They become one and the same thing in through this parable. So we see that the real value of a person is that they're a human being. There is the start of Christianity. Forget the politics, forget the borders, forget all of that. A person is of value because they are a human being. When you watched that video earlier, if it moved you, it wasn't because they were per se Yazidi people or from Iraq or something. It moved you because they were human beings who were suffering. And it affected you. And that's what Jesus is saying. We find value in the fact we're human beings, and human beings find real value because they are the object and the work of God's creativity and His love. He loves them as much as He loves us. He Himself is the Son of Man, right? That's what He called Himself. If we're alive in Christ, we understand this. We understand where the value of the human being comes from. And we understand that the need of the human being is a call to us because it ties to the identity of Christ. In fact, the need of a human being is synonymous with a call from God. The two are the same thing. Can't get away from it. Where did you come up with that, Pastor? Matthew 25. I heard Jesus say this. It's something we can't get away from. The bottom line of the teaching comes down to this, is how do you and I react and act to human need in navigating humankind in their need. And how we do is something on which we are judged. Ooh, doesn't that sound scary? We are judged on it. But the positive side to judgment, that judgment, it isn't necessarily this negative, condemning thing. For instance, just take even a sports game. If we were to have a game of basketball in there, and who we would judge on, ultimately, who got the most baskets. So you know right off that the whole thing of the game, the whole objective of the game is to get baskets. And so it's the same here in life. If God judges us on certain things, then by default, those are the most important things in life. And if it's coming from God, who is perfect and created life in the first place, then those things also bring the most meaning you could possibly have to your life. They will bring the most purpose. So there's this positive side to judgment. And we're going to use that. I'm going to go a little mathematical, and I'm going to set up a little diagram. And it goes along with the series of, I call it a diagram of life, a diagram of judgment. Because life and judgment are so synonymous. And if we bring up a thing here, we're going to see that one of the things that we have is there, every verse, including in the New Testament, including this passage we studied, so many supporting texts, we're ending up with these polar, this kind of a polar thing. Counterpoints that play against each other. In this case, if you look through, you're talking about Jesus, oh, that's heavenly, that's spiritual, that's all of those things, it's true. And there we are, spiritual. However, what was he talking about? I needed water. I needed food. I needed material things. I needed stuff for the physical world. And so here we are, the spiritual and the material, they can't be separated out. Defining them as points in here, what I'm getting at in my little diagram is this, is that when we talk about the spiritual, I'm talking about the inner life. I'm talking about the things that the qualities of God that are in you, or maybe not in you. We're talking about the things that you don't really see, the intangible things. I look at Carol here. I can't look at Carol and say, okay, there's God in there. I can see into her soul. And you know, God's presence, that inner life is there. But I can't necessarily see it directly. I have to depend on the material side of things, the outer life. I have to depend on seeing what actions does she take, what reactions does she have to things, what's visible to others, what's tangible. You know, if there's nothing tangible about your Christian life, according to James, well, you know what? You really don't have it. Because faith without what is dead? Works, ergos, material, physical things. So we're continually dealing with a sliding scale between these two things. What's going on inside you and what's going on outside you. If it's all outside stuff, it's show. If it's all inside stuff, it doesn't matter. So somewhere in there is what you may call a sweet spot. There's somewhere in there that we're right on target with God. And what we find in here is we're finding out that, you know, as we do physical things, we don't do physical things to be spiritual. We do them because we are spiritual or that we are godly. It lets you know who you really are if you have this right. Motivations, everything comes down to this. But as we look at this passage, now, like the Yazidi people are a great case study in this for us, is sometimes the needs, if we're talking about navigating the needs of humanity, sometimes they're near, but sometimes they're far away. And God has this way of maybe not so much distinguishing, but there is a balance there as well. So I would propose to you a second set of points on which all how we navigate the needs in our Christian walk are with this too. Now, close and distant can deal with a number of issues, a number of things. For instance, we could be talking about focus. I'm always just thinking about what's happening right here, right now. That's all I'm about. Or, I never think about this. I'm always thinking about, you know, people I never see. Or we could be talking perspective. The world ends at this wall, at these walls. You know, we've had people into basically that was their Christian faith, is that what happens inside these walls is Christianity, everything else is just out there. Or I could, the other way around is that real Christianity is happening everywhere else but here. You know, there's a line, there's a continuum there. In the same way, if my perspective then kind of sets up my concerns. Well, if everything of any worth is only happening in here, you know what? The rest of the world can burn. All that matters is what's in here. Or my concerns could be so much, well, this is too personal, my concerns are all out there. And we could keep going on. It makes sense. One builds on another, is that if that's my concern, then my reaction is, well, if I'm a close person, too bad, so sad for the Yazidi people, but, you know, this is my Christian world, and this is all that matters for me. Let somebody else take care of that. Or I could be the other extreme, and it's all about them and nothing in here. We're working a sliding scale. And bottomly, you see theologies on there, and the reason theology is there is because all these things set up, theology means your study, your understanding of God. Now, if all my concern and all my reaction and all my perspective is small, you know what? I've got a small God. I just have by default. But on the other hand, if everything were on the other extreme and that God's working everywhere else, then God is very distant from me. Oh, I believe there's God, but He's out there doing stuff, but He's doing it somewhere else and not for me. So here we are on the sliding perspective of things. And somewhere, and there's a sweet spot because God is far away, and He's doing things you know nothing about. And He is doing things in here. He's doing both, so there's a balance to be had. So what happens if we take understanding God works close and far, and He works up there and He works down here? We end up with a kind of a graph here where those lines intersect. Here's the proposal, is that when we hit the mark, it's where the balance is. It's in the center. Now, the mark was a term that I thought was great to use because we also have another Christian term, don't we? And it's defined as missing the mark. What is missing the mark? Sin. Missing the mark is a definition for sin. So, and if God's talking to Christians here, he's talking to professing God people. He's saying there is a mark to be hit. And we will be judged on how we do with that mark. But there's a lot of ways to miss the mark. Now, just going back to the basic geometry, you can see, in fact, it's implied. There's a range that we could go, and that's where this comes in, is what lines when we're getting into one of those areas or another. But it is very easy to be somewhere else. There's a million missing the marks if there and only one hitting the mark. How do we know? Where do we get with that sweet spot? What does the mark really mean? Well, it means that to hit the mark is to be right with God. To hit the mark is to be right with God. To hit the mark means doing life in the way it was meant to be done. To hit the mark means your life will have the most possible meaning and purpose that it possibly can, and fulfillment. To hit the mark means, according to Christ, that we will have our reward in eternity. And in fact have our reward here as well. It all ties into how we balance in hitting the mark. Hitting the mark. The balance between far and near, close and distant, spiritual and material. Because it can't be the extreme in any of those things. When I was looking at this and researching it, one of my favorite scholars, William Barclay, he had an interesting commentary, an interesting story on it, an ancient story actually, of a Roman soldier by the name of Martin of Tours. And the story goes like this. The story of Martin, it says, he was a soldier and a Christian. One cold winter day, as he was entering a city, a beggar stopped him and asked for alms. Martin had no money, but the beggar was blue and shivering with cold, and Martin gave what he had. He took off the soldier's coat. Worn and frayed as it was, he cut it into two and gave half of it to the beggar man. That night he had a dream. In it he saw the heavenly places and all the angels, and Jesus in the midst of them. And Jesus was wearing half of a Roman soldier's cloak. One of the angels said to him, Master, why are you wearing that battered old cloak? Who gave it to you? And Jesus answered softly, my servant Martin. When we learn the generosity which without calculation helps men in their simplest things, we too will know the joy of helping Jesus Christ himself. There's a verse. Jesus said, whoever tries to keep their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for his sake will find it. Find it in a few places, Luke 9:24 for one. Hitting the mark deals with losing your life to find it. How counterintuitive. But it brings in an unexpected reward, and all the other rewards we might bring up is that in giving away ourselves, that's where we find joy. Because that's where Christ is. How strange. Don't gather to yourself, but live with open hands. And that's where you find joy. Hitting the mark. It's a balance between what you're holding close, your perspective, your whole way of seeing God, or distant, and the balance in between. It's not to be like God or to be God by doing good things. It's to have good things done through you because you are in fact godly. There are things we balance to lead a centered life. And there are dynamics, and we're playing with them all the time, or we're dealing with them all the time. None of us in our fallen state are like on that mark all the time. But you know what? We can be correcting in the right direction. We can be correcting in the right direction. But are we looking enough to see that we're straying? and know and discern and to move back to where the mark is. A big being on the mark, you know what it is really? Because I'll tell you this for all, it's comfortable to be off the mark in one direction or another. Some of us are naturally wired to sit in one of those quadrants or another. But on the mark means giving up your mark. It means giving up that thing that's naturally comfortable to you and going where God says it is actually perfectly centered and not dealing with anything else. The whole idea, and we'll go into this too, that's the idea I say of the series, is how we know where we are. And we're going to start with a little exercise today. We'll continue it on in January. But the little exercise deals with your next step card, and if you have your guide sheet, you see that I put the little diagram on there with the range. Now, we didn't go a lot into what each of these things mean, but we went into them enough. And so I'm asking for this little exercise, is dealing just specifically with the Yazidi people. Where was your reaction? Do you feel you were dead center on the mark? Or maybe one way or another, some quadrant or another? How did you fall in there? Of course, it doesn't mean that we can all go and over there and deal with them in person physically, but just like at the end, there was the opportunity to at least support them in a financial way through the CAMA. There are different things that we can do. And it's not all about the Yazidi people or even missions in general. What I'm saying is, when we see human need, what really is our reaction? What really is our reaction? Where do we fall on this little graph?